On her very first assignment as a maid, Naomi Ellington stepped into a mansion so vast it nearly stole her breath. The silence was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat echo. She dragged a small ladder across the marble floor, carefully climbing up to replace a burnt-out light bulb. A simple task. Familiar. Something she had done 1,000 times in ordinary homes. But here, beneath the warm, golden glow, under the gaze of stern oil portraits staring down at her, Naomi's hands began to tremble. Then, a voice rose behind her. Deep, clear, strikingly familiar. "You're beautiful." Naomi froze, her heart slamming to a halt. The glass she was holding slipped from her grasp, shattering across the cold stone floor. Shards scattered everywhere, glittering like tiny accusations against her clumsy beginning. She spun around, and there he was. Not a fellow worker, not the butler. It was Sterling Ashford, the billionaire every soul in the city knew by name. From that moment, Naomi understood. This wasn't just a job. This could be the turn that changed her life forever. If you've ever believed a single unexpected encounter could rewrite destiny, stay with us. This story is meant for you. Naomi Ellington stepped into the Ashford estate with her employment paper crumpled in her hand. For a moment, she wondered if she had walked into a museum rather than a home. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, crowned by a crystal chandelier that sparkled like frozen rain. Oil paintings of grim ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes following her every step. Her uniform felt stiff against her skin. The marble beneath her shoes echoed each movement, reminding her how small she was in this vast place. Naomi whispered under her breath, almost as if to steady herself. "Just cleaning. You got this. It's only cleaning." She had cleaned all her life, tiny apartments, grocery aisles, even hotel rooms, but never a mansion where the doorknobs looked like they belonged in a palace. The silence of the foyer pressed on her shoulders. She clutched the paper tighter, reminding herself she needed this job. Rent was late again, and options were running out. Still, standing there, Naomi felt invisible. She was nothing more than a shadow drifting through someone else's world. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this house would not let her stay invisible for long. The sharp click of heels cut through the silence. Naomi turned. A woman appeared, hair pulled back in a silver knot, uniform pressed to perfection. Her gaze carried the weight of decades, and her voice was calm but firm. "Miss Ellington," she said, "I trust you reviewed the orientation material?" Naomi nodded quickly, though she had barely skimmed the thick packet filled with rules, cleaning methods, and something called invisible discretion. Mrs. Winslow studied her a moment longer, eyes narrowing as if measuring every flaw. "You are here to work. That means efficiency, silence, and invisibility. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Naomi whispered. "In this house," Mrs. Winslow continued, "staff are not heard, and certainly not noticed. If you remember that, your time here will be simple. If not—" Her sentence trailed off, but the meaning was sharp as glass. Naomi lowered her eyes, cheeks burning. She had been underestimated before, scolded before, but this felt different. Here, she wasn't even allowed to exist. Mrs. Winslow finally handed her a box and a small ladder. "Your first task. Second-floor library. A lamp requires a new bulb. Be careful." Her heels clicked away, leaving Naomi alone with a ladder, a box, and a growing knot in her chest. Naomi climbed the sweeping staircase, the polished banister smooth beneath her hand. She tried not to stare at the portraits, yet she felt their eyes chasing her. Each step carried the weight of rules she had just been given. Be invisible, be silent, do not exist. The library opened before her like a hidden cathedral. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, lined with leather-bound volumes. Golden light poured through tall windows, falling across deep chairs and a massive oak desk. Her breath caught. Books had always been her escape. She wanted to linger, but the lamp stood crooked near the window, waiting for her. Naomi set down the box and unfolded the ladder with care. The bulb inside gleamed like it cost more than her rent. She swallowed hard and whispered to herself again, "It's only cleaning. It's just a lamp." She steadied the ladder, testing it twice. The silence of the room wrapped around her as if even the books were holding their breath. With careful fingers, she reached up toward the lamp. Her hands trembled, not from the height, but from the strange sense that something was about to change, and she would not walk away from this library the same. The ladder wobbled. Naomi stretched, muttering under her breath, trying to twist the stubborn bulb free. Her palms grew damp. She gripped the lamp to steady herself, heart pounding at the thought of breaking something priceless. Finally, the old bulb loosened. Relief fluttered in her chest until her fingers slipped. The bulb fell, shattering against the polished floor. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. Naomi froze. Her breath hitched. The ladder swayed dangerously beneath her, and then, from behind her, came a voice. Low, steady, rough around the edges. "You're beautiful." The words hit harder than the shattering glass. Naomi's body went rigid. Her hands clung to the lamp as her pulse hammered against her throat. No one had ever said those words to her. Not like this, not in this tone. Slowly, almost fearfully, she turned her head. A man stood in the doorway. Dark hair, storm-gray eyes, shoulders filling the frame as though the mansion itself bent around him. He wore a charcoal suit that seemed tailored to power. It could only be him, Sterling Ashford. Naomi's breath caught, and for the first time in her life she felt seen. Naomi clung to the ladder, heart racing. She turned fully, breath shallow, and met his gaze. Sterling Ashford stood framed in the doorway, every inch of him radiating control. His suit caught the light, his gray eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. The silence pressed down until Naomi blurted, I was just changing the light bulb." Her voice cracked, shaky and small in the massive library. She gestured helplessly toward the broken glass. Sterling's eyes flickered to the shards, then back to her face. The faintest shadow of a smile touched his lips, but his voice was even. "Are you hurt?" "No," Naomi stammered, forcing herself to breathe. "Just startled. I'll clean it up right away." "Don't apologize," he said softly, stepping closer. "I didn't mean to startle you." Her knees trembled as she began climbing down. His gaze followed her every movement. The ladder creaked, her shoes finally touched the floor, and suddenly he was only a few feet away. Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wanted to disappear, yet some part of her burned under the weight of his attention. For a man of power, his question lingered simple but sincere. "Are you sure you're all right?" Naomi turned to face him fully now, clutching the broken bulb fragments in her hand. She steadied her breath, forcing a polite smile. "I'm Naomi," she said, the words rushing out. Then, without thinking, she extended her hand. The moment stretched awkwardly. Was she supposed to shake hands with her employer? The question echoed too late, but Sterling looked down, studied her hand, and after a pause took it. His palm was warm, his grip firm, but not crushing. Their hands lingered together longer than necessary. The silence thickened. Naomi's throat tightened as her pulse jumped. She finally withdrew, but the absence of his touch felt like a small loss, sharp and immediate. "Sterling Ashford," he said, though they both knew she already knew who he was. The way he said it, simple yet commanding, made her chest tighten. "I should let you get back to work," he added, but his body did not move. Naomi knelt quickly, gathering shards of glass, hiding her blush. "This isn't exactly the first impression I wanted to make." Sterling's voice lowered, calm and deliberate. "On the contrary, Miss Ellington, I have a feeling you'll make quite an impression." Hours later, Naomi faced a new battle. The laundry room. Machines gleamed like futuristic puzzles, their panels lit with foreign buttons. She muttered under her breath, "All right, let's see what you've got." She pressed what looked like a start button. The machine hummed, linen sheets tumbling inside. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. Maybe she could handle this. But when the cycle ended, her hope collapsed. She lifted the first sheet and gasped. The pristine white cotton was now pink. Every sheet, every towel, a soft, humiliating shade of blush. "No, no, no," she whispered, clutching the fabric. "This can't be happening." A voice behind her. "What's wrong?" She turned to find Sterling at the doorway. "I think," Naomi said, mortified, "I may have just turned your Egyptian cotton sheets into cotton candy." She held one up like evidence. "I'm so sorry. I'll replace them." Sterling stepped closer, calm, eyes glinting. He touched the sheet lightly. "Pink is more interesting." Naomi blinked at him, stunned. "You're just saying that." "I'm saying," he replied, gaze locking with hers, "sometimes interesting is exactly what this house needs." Her breath caught. Somehow, disaster had become connection. The next day, Naomi dusted the cavernous dining room, humming softly. Her grandmother's favorite tune escaped her lips, an old Stevie Wonder song. She added a little sway to her steps, a secret rhythm to keep her nerves steady. Her voice carried through the high ceilings, bouncing off the chandelier's crystal drops. For a moment, she forgot where she was, lost in music and memory. Stevie Wonder. Naomi spun around, nearly knocking over a vase. Sterling stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, his tie loosened, jacket gone. His expression wasn't stern, almost relaxed. "Oh, Mr. Ashford," she stammered, clutching her duster like a shield. "I didn't hear you. I was just dusting, and apparently singing." "Don't apologize," Sterling said, stepping into the room. His voice held a wistful note. "It's been a long time since anyone sang in this house." Naomi studied him, puzzled. "You don't like music?" "I like it," he answered. "I just don't have time for it." His words fell heavy. A man who had everything, yet no time for joy. Naomi tilted her head, her smile soft but daring. "That sounds exhausting." For the first time he looked caught off guard. Sterling's brow lifted, curiosity flashing across his face. "Exhausting?" "Yes," Naomi replied, setting down her duster. "Your life is all structure, all efficiency. But is it fun?" His lips curved faintly, as though no one had asked him such a question before. "Fun isn't the point. Efficiency is." Naomi folded her arms, studying him. "Maybe that's the problem." The words slipped out before she could catch them. Her cheeks warmed instantly. She bit her lip, bracing for a reprimand. But Sterling didn't look offended. Instead, something softened in his gaze. He stepped closer, his voice low. "What do you mean?" Naomi hesitated, then said, "Maybe life isn't just about efficiency. Maybe it's about the moments you don't plan, the ones that catch you off guard." Silence stretched. Sterling's eyes searched hers, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Her heart pounded. She wanted to retreat, but couldn't. His presence held her there, suspended between danger and desire. For a man who lived in schedules and numbers, Sterling Ashford looked, just for a breath, like someone craving the chaos she carried. The air was heavy, but Amara didn't step back. Instead, she reached out. Her fingers brushed against Harrison's weathered hand. The touch was small, almost timid, yet it landed like a spark in the dark. His body stilled. Decades of armor cracked in that single contact. He looked down at their joined hands as if he couldn't believe it. For years, no one had dared to hold him without expectation, without agenda. Amara's voice was soft, trembling, but sure. "It's never too late." Harrison lifted his gaze to hers. In her eyes he saw something he hadn't known he was searching for. Light. Not pity, not duty, just a quiet recognition that he was still human. The mansion around them faded. The silence no longer pressed him into loneliness. It wrapped him in something else. Possibility. He tightened his grip, not in command, but in fear that if he let go, the warmth would vanish. For the first time in years, Harrison Ashford felt like he wasn't alone. And for him, that fragile moment was more precious than all the power he had ever held. Later, when the room fell into calm again, Harrison spoke. His voice was lower now, stripped of its authority. "Amara, I have a request." She hesitated, sensing the weight in his tone. "Not as your employer, not as a man with money, as a father who never learned how to be one." His throat tightened. "Will you pretend to be my daughter? Just for the weeks I have left." The words hit her like a blow. She blinked, unsure if she had heard right. Pretend to be his daughter? Harrison's eyes shimmered with something raw. Not for inheritance. Not for show. Just, so I know what it feels like to have someone who cares. To hear a voice call me Dad before I go. Amara's chest ached. She had seen powerful men, but never one so fragile. Her mouth opened, but no answer came. "I am not asking for perfection," he whispered. "Only presence. Only you." The silence stretched, filling the room like a storm about to break. For Amara, this was not just an unusual request. It was an impossible one, yet his desperation carved straight into her heart. Amara stepped back, shaking her head. "I can't. I'm just a maid. I don't know how to be someone's daughter." Her voice cracked with confusion. Harrison leaned forward, frail but insistent. "You already are." She froze. "You've done more in a few days than anyone in years. You look at me. You speak to me. You remind me I'm still alive. That's what a daughter does." Amara swallowed hard. Every part of her wanted to run from the weight of his words. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not enough?" Harrison's breath rattled, but his eyes stayed steady. "You are enough. Just stay. Just be here." The simplicity of his plea shook her more than any demand ever had. She pressed her lips together, torn between fear and compassion. Her whole life she had been told she wasn't enough, too messy, too ordinary. And now, this man of wealth and power was begging her to be something she never believed she could be. The silence between them turned thick, almost sacred. Amara realized that maybe, just maybe, he didn't need perfection. He only needed her. Amara sank slowly into the chair beside him. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "If I say yes, then you must promise me something too." Harrison's brow furrowed. "Anything. You have to let me teach you. Not business, not power. How to be proud of someone else. How to see worth in things you can't control." His lips parted, trembling. Tears welled, unguarded, and rolled down his face. He hadn't cried in decades, but now the walls broke. "You would do that for me?" His voice shook. Amara nodded. "We'll call it even. You wanted a daughter. I wanted a father who listens. Maybe we can learn together." Harrison reached for her hand again, clinging as if it anchored him. The pact was not written on paper, not sealed in wealth. It was carved in tears, in the trembling silence between two people who had lived too long without family. In that moment, the estate no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a fragile home, born from two empty souls finding each other at last. The next morning, the mansion stirred differently. Amara arrived earlier than usual, her steps lighter. Instead of scrubbing in silence, she carried books, settling by Harrison's bedside. He watched her flip through pages, her lips moving softly as she read. "What are you studying?" he asked. "Teaching methods," she said. "It was my dream once before life got in the way." His brow lifted. "A teacher? That suits you." She laughed quietly. "No one's ever said that before." Harrison leaned back, frail but attentive. "Tell me more. About your dreams, your likes, the small things." The request startled her. She had spent her life invisible, overlooked. Now, someone was asking. She told him about her grandmother's garden, about her love for Stevie Wonder, about the postcards she collected from places she never traveled. Harrison listened, not as a billionaire, not as an employer. He listened like a father. Every word mattered. For Amara, the days shifted. Work became less about chores, more about presence. For Harrison, the ticking clock slowed, replaced by something sweeter, the simple rhythm of a daughter's voice filling his empty house. The afternoon light spilled across the room, soft against Harrison's frail frame. Amara adjusted his blanket, then lingered by his side, her lips parted, hesitant. The word clung to her throat before it finally broke free. "Dad!" The sound was fragile, almost uncertain, but it filled the air like a prayer. Harrison's chest rose sharply. His eyes, tired and worn, brightened with something that had been missing for years. Slowly, his lips curved into a smile. At that moment, the nurse stepped in to check his vitals. Harrison straightened as best he could. His thin voice carried surprising strength. "This is my daughter," he said proudly, nodding to Amara. The nurse blinked, unsure, then offered a kind smile. But the words mattered less to her than they did to him. Harrison's face glowed with pride. His frail body still shook, but in that instant, he stood taller than any empire he had built. For Amara, the word felt strange, yet it wrapped around her heart with unexpected warmth. It was no longer a performance, it was something deeper. For both of them, the line between pretending and truth had started to blur. Evening shadows stretched long across the hall when the front door opened. Voices echoed, unfamiliar, sharper than the gentle hush the house had grown used to. Amara set aside the tea tray just as three figures appeared. A man in his 40s, tall, stern, with eyes as cold as steel. Beside him, a polished woman in pearls, her gaze sharp and measuring. And between them, a young girl clutching a doll, wide-eyed and watchful. Chris, his wife, Vanessa, their daughter, Chloe. They stopped short when their eyes landed on Amara, seated close beside Harrison's bed. The silence that followed was thick, jagged. Chris's jaw tightened. Vanessa's lips pursed. The little girl clung closer to her mother. Amara felt heat rush to her cheeks. She rose quickly, unsure where to stand. "Dad," Chris said, his tone clipped. "What's going on here?" Harrison reached for Amara's hand without hesitation. His grip was frail, but steady. The visitors exchanged looks, suspicion settling like smoke in the air. For the first time in weeks, the fragile peace of the house shattered. Chris's voice cut through the room, sharp and demanding. "Who is she?" His eyes narrowed on Amara like a blade. Amara's throat went dry. Words tangled caught in her chest. But before she could speak, Harrison's grip tightened around her hand. "This is Amara," he said firmly, his voice thin but resolute. "She's my friend." The silence that followed was colder than winter. Chris's eyes darkened. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her pearls glinting in the light. Chloe peeked from behind her mother's skirt, confused by the tension. Amara stood frozen. The warmth she had found in this house suddenly felt like it was slipping away. Her heart pounded. She wasn't prepared to defend herself against his real family. Chris stepped closer, towering over her. "A friend? In my father's bedroom?" Amara wanted to shrink, to vanish into the floor. But Harrison's frail hand clung to hers, a quiet shield against the storm. "No," Harrison said again, slower this time, eyes burning with rare fire. "Not just a friend. She is here because I want her here." The room turned to ice. Vanessa was the first to break the silence. Her laugh was soft but sharp, slicing through the air. "Community service? How noble! Taking care of the lonely old man." Her words dripped with mockery. Amara felt her face flush, shame clawing up her throat. Chris wasn't amused. His voice rose, heavy with accusation. "This isn't kindness. This is manipulation. You're using him, and he's too weak to see it." Each word struck like a blow. Amara's chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to scream that she had never wanted his money, his name, or his empire, but her voice betrayed her, small and trembling. Vanessa crossed her arms, gaze piercing. "We've seen this before. Young woman, old man with too much wealth. It's a story as old as time." Amara's stomach twisted. She had faced judgment before, but never so cutting, never so public. To be humiliated in front of his son, his family, it was unbearable. Her hands trembled. She wanted to run, but Harrison's hand remained in hers, fragile yet unyielding. His silence, though heavy, promised something she hadn't expected. He would not let her stand alone. The fire in Harrison's chest flared brighter than his weakness. He sat up straighter, defying the pain that pulled at his body. His voice rang out, raw but steady. "Enough." Chris froze. Vanessa's smirk faltered. Even Chloe stilled. Harrison's eyes locked on his son's, unblinking. "Amara is not an intruder. She is not a scheme. She is family." The word fell heavy, undeniable. Chris scoffed, shaking his head. "Family? You've known her weeks." Harrison's jaw set. "In weeks, she's given me what you haven't in years. Care, presence, humanity." His frail hand lifted, still gripping Amara's. "She asks for nothing. She gives everything. That is family." Vanessa muttered under her breath, but Harrison pressed on. "Do not mistake her for what you fear. She is not here for my money. She is here for me." The silence afterward was thick, almost holy. Amara blinked back tears. No one had ever defended her like this. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. For the first time, she was claimed. Amara's chest heaved. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears welled as she pulled her hand free from Harrison's, clutching it to her chest. "It's true," she whispered. "He asked me to pretend, to be his daughter, just for these last weeks." The room froze. Chris's eyes widened, his suspicion now hardened into outrage. Vanessa let out a sharp gasp. Even the nurse stopped moving. Amara's voice cracked as she tried to explain. "He wasn't asking for pity. He didn't want to die alone. He wanted to know what it felt like, to have someone by his side." Her tears streaked down, hot and unrelenting. "I never wanted his money. I never asked for anything. I just stayed, because he needed someone." The silence that followed was suffocating. Harrison's frail voice broke through, rough but steady. "Yes, I asked her. And do you know why?" His eyes burned with fire as he turned toward his son. "Because she was here when I needed her, and none of you were." The truth, raw and unpolished, shattered the last illusions in the room. Chris's face flushed crimson, fury spilling over. "She's a stranger. You let some girl off the street replace your real family?" Amara's shoulders trembled, but her voice didn't waver. "At least I showed up. Where were you? When he couldn't sleep at night, when he cried in pain? Where were you?" Her words ripped through the air like thunder. Chris faltered, but anger pushed him forward. "I have responsibilities, a family of my own, a business to run." Amara's eyes locked on his, blazing. "Responsibilities? Is that what you call it? Or is it just easier to let someone else carry the weight you abandoned?" The room shook with the clash. Vanessa tried to intervene, her tone icy. "This is outrageous." But Harrison raised a trembling hand. "No, let her speak." The old man's gaze moved between them, pain etched into every line of his face. The confrontation was no longer just about Amara. It was about years of absence, silence, and wounds that had never healed. And for the first time, Chris had no easy answer. Harrison's breath rattled, but his words were clear. Amara held my hand when I was afraid. She stayed when the nights were long. Tell me, Chris, when was the last time you did that for me? Chris opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His jaw clenched, his chest rose and fell, but the silence betrayed him. Harrison's voice cracked, emotion breaking through the dam. You are my son, my blood, but she gave me something you stopped giving me long ago. Comfort, care, presence. Amara looked down, guilt and gratitude warring in her heart. She had never meant to take anyone's place. Yet, in that moment, Harrison's words made her feel both chosen and accused. Chloe tugged at her father's sleeve, eyes wide with confusion. She had never seen her strong father so speechless, so stripped of his armor. The room was heavy with the truth. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about pretense. It was about love, the kind that had been buried under years of ambition and neglect. And now, it was all spilling into the open, raw and unrelenting. It was Chloe's small voice that pierced the storm. "Grandpa," she asked softly, clutching her doll tighter, "are you really going to die?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. The room fell silent, every adult caught off guard. Harrison's lips trembled. He tried to form words, but the truth weighed heavy on him. His silence said more than any explanation. Chris's eyes snapped shut, his face twisting with guilt. Vanessa looked away, blinking hard, as if the innocence of the question had struck a wound she didn't want exposed. Amara knelt beside Chloe, brushing the girl's hair back gently. "He's sick, sweetheart. And sometimes when people get very sick, they don't have much time left." Chloe's eyes filled with tears. She turned back to her grandfather. "But who will hold your hand then?" Harrison's breath caught, his chest shuddering with grief and tenderness. He reached out, frail fingers brushing her tiny hand. The question lingered, echoing in the silence. Who would stay when the end came? Harrison's voice wavered, but it carried the weight of a confession long overdue. "The truth is, I failed first. I chased money when I should have chased laughter. I built walls of wealth and left no room for love. And you, my children, you learned from my mistake." Chris's eyes widened, a flicker of pain breaking through his anger. Vanessa stiffened, but her gaze fell to the floor. Harrison's eyes brimmed with tears. "I taught you that success mattered more than sitting by someone's side. I taught you that deals and schedules were more important than dinners and stories. And now, here we are, strangers in the same room." Amara's throat tightened as she listened. She had seen men powerful and broken, but never this bare. Harrison's voice cracked. "I gave you the wrong lesson, and it cost us everything." The words hung in the air, sharp and merciless. Chris swallowed hard. For the first time his anger wavered, not because of Amara, but because the mirror of truth had been turned on him. The silence was no longer cold. It was full of sorrow, regret, and the ache of a family unraveling. Harrison's frail hand reached for the leather folder resting by his bed. His breath was shallow, but his eyes carried a rare determination. Slowly, he placed the papers on the table. "This," he said, voice raspy, "is my will. For years I thought about leaving everything to Amara, because she gave me what money never could." Gasps filled the room. Amara shook her head, tears rushing to her eyes. "No, I never—" "I know," Harrison interrupted softly. "You never asked. That's why I wanted to, but I've changed it." Chris leaned forward, tense. Harrison continued, "My children will inherit, but not without condition. You will only receive if you put family first, if you choose dinners over deals, hands over handshakes, presents over profit." Chris's face shifted, pride battling shame. Vanessa looked stunned, speechless. Harrison's voice weakened, but the words carried power. "Wealth without love is emptiness. I refuse to pass down emptiness." The silence that followed was heavier than gold. Harrison turned toward Amara, his gaze tender. "But for you, I have set aside something different." Amara shook her head, trembling. "Please, don't. I don't want your money." "It's not for you," Harrison whispered. "It's for them, for children who have no one, for those who need what you gave me. Care without cost, love without demand." He slid a separate envelope across the table. "Enough to build your dream, a home for the forgotten, a center for the ones like you once were." Amara pressed her hands over her mouth, sobs breaking free. "Why would you do this?" His eyes softened. "Because you showed me the truth. You taught me what wealth is for, not to build walls, but to open doors." Chris watched, silent. For the first time, he saw his father not as a mogul, but as a man humbled by love. Amara wept openly. She had never sought a legacy, but Harrison had given her one anyway. The room was still. Then Chris broke. His shoulders shook, his breath hitched, and suddenly tears streamed down his face. "Dad," he whispered, the word choking in his throat. "I'm sorry. For the years I wasn't here. For choosing everything else before you." Harrison's hand trembled as he lifted it. Chris knelt by the bed, gripping it tightly. The old man's voice cracked with emotion. "We still have time, son. Not much, but enough." The sight of father and son clinging to each other tore through Amara's heart. She turned away slightly, letting them have the moment, her own tears falling quietly. Even Vanessa looked shaken, her usual poise slipping as she reached for Chloe's hand. The walls of anger and pride crumbled, if only for a moment. What remained was raw, aching love, long buried, finally unearthed. Amara's chest ached with bittersweet joy. She had helped spark this moment, but she knew it belonged to them. Weeks passed like fragile glass, each day precious, each moment counted. Harrison grew weaker, his voice softer, his breaths shallower, but he was never alone. On his final evening, the room was filled. Chris sat at his side, holding one hand. Chloe clutched the other, her small fingers curled tightly. Vanessa lingered near, quieter than ever before, and Amara sat close, the daughter of spirit, her presence steady, her heart breaking. Harrison looked around at them, his eyes tired but peaceful. "For the first time," he whispered, "I feel rich." His chest rose once more, then slowly fell. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full of love. Tears streamed freely. Chris pressed his forehead to his father's hand. Chloe wept softly against his arm. Amara held back sobs, whispering through trembling lips, "You're not alone." Harrison had left the world not as a tycoon, not as a lonely man, but as a father, a grandfather, a soul finally surrounded by love. 6 months later, the city gathered for the opening of Hope Haven. Children filled the bright new halls, their laughter echoing off painted walls alive with color and promise. At the center stood Amara, her smile trembling with tears. What had once been only a dream was now real, built from love rather than wealth. Chris visited often with his daughter Chloe. Together they tended Harrison's grave, laying down fresh flowers with quiet reverence. Each visit softened the sharp edges of grief. Vanessa, once skeptical, now watched silently, humbled by the legacy her father-in-law had chosen to leave. Harrison's greatest gift was not measured in numbers or buildings. It was measured in hearts healed, in connections restored, in love rediscovered. He had left behind more than fortune. He had left behind a reason to live differently. Money fades, fame vanishes, power slips away, but love endures. And if this story has touched your heart, share it with someone you love. Because sometimes a story is not just to be heard, it is to be remembered, carried, and lived. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next story that might move you to tears and bring healing to your soul.